Hi, I'm Brielle, and my sister crashed the car while I was in it. But that wasn't the worst part. While I lay unconscious in a hospital bed, she was sleeping with my fiancé. They planned a wedding with my venue, wore my dress, and handed my ring to each other like I never existed. Everyone knew. No one said a word. Ever felt like your entire family was in on something, except you? And what would you do if the truth came wrapped in silence and served with cake? 3 weeks before the wedding, everything still felt possible. My mornings began with to-do lists scribbled on napkins, emails about floral arrangements, and texts from Dorian like, "Still can't believe I get to marry you." There was this warmth in my chest every time I read his words, like I had finally stepped into the life I'd always pictured. And Celine? She was surprisingly helpful, showing up unannounced with latte in hand, dropping names of photographers I'd never afford, acting like the sister she used to be before we both got too busy for each other. That Wednesday started with snow, not a light dusting, but the kind that clings to your windshield and dares you to drive anyway. I offered to reschedule the dress fitting. Celine insisted. "It's just flurries, Brie. Stop being dramatic." She laughed as she tossed her coat into the back seat of her SUV. The roads turned into glass just 20 minutes out of Asheville. I remember clutching the seatbelt when the tires skidded slightly. "You should slow down," I said. Celine waved me off, her eyes still on her phone screen. I looked away, swallowing a rising anxiety that had little to do with the weather. Something in her voice had been clipped lately. Too cheerful, too smooth, like she was performing. I blinked, and then there was nothing but the sound of metal folding in on itself. A crunch, a scream, a silence so thick it pressed on my ribs. And then black. I woke to the scent of antiseptic and the soft, persistent beep of machines. My eyes refused to open at first, but the voices, I heard them before I saw anything. "She's still sedated," Celine said. Her voice was too close. "She needs to rest," another voice replied. "Dorian." They were both there when I finally blinked through the blur. Celine perched at the edge of my hospital bed, smiling too wide, while Dorian stood beside her, fingers brushing the sleeve of her cardigan like they belonged there. My chest tightened, not from the IV or the bruises, but from something I couldn't quite name yet. The room was too warm, the light too soft. Everything felt rehearsed. "Hey you," Dorian said, stepping forward, brushing hair from my face. "You scared us." I tried to smile, but my lips didn't move the way I expected. "What happened?" "Black ice," Celine answered for him. "You hit your head, concussion, minor fractures. You're okay, thank God." "You hit black ice," I corrected softly, my throat dry. "You were driving." She froze, just a flicker, but it was there. "Right," she said quickly. "Yes, I meant we did. It happened so fast." For the next 2 days, they never left. Celine brought magazines I didn't want and soups I couldn't eat. Dorian dozed in the chair beside me, but it was Celine who always fetched the nurse, fluffed my pillows, took my phone, for safekeeping. And I watched. When Celine leaned in too close to whisper something that made Dorian chuckle, I watched. When his hand brushed hers as she passed him a water bottle, I watched. I counted the seconds his eyes lingered on her lips when she spoke. I started to feel like a guest in my own recovery, like they were hosting the scene and I was the extra. The night before they released me, Celine sat near the window, scrolling on her phone while Dorian read a book he hadn't touched all week. Without looking up, she said, "He didn't leave your side, you know. He stayed with me the whole night." My breath caught. She didn't flinch. Dorian looked up, startled, but didn't correct her. She meant to say, "With you, didn't she?" That's what she should have said. I didn't confront them. Not then. I just lay there, eyes open in the dark, pretending to sleep. I replayed every word, every look, every gesture, and they stopped making sense. They didn't leave me alone because they cared. They didn't smother me in support because they were worried. No, it felt like guilt, or worse, ownership. When the nurse came to check my vitals that morning, I asked for my phone. Celine handed it over without a word. It was dead. The screen cracked, just like something else inside me. I stared at the ceiling as the machines beeped steadily behind me. My name didn't feel like my own anymore. My wedding felt like someone else's event. I wasn't sure if I was crazy, or finally waking up. The first full day back at home was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that seeps into your bones and makes everything feel a little too still. I was wrapped in my grandmother's old quilt, propped up on the couch in the sunroom. The snow outside had melted into slush, but the cold lingered. My phone, still cracked from the crash, sat charging on the side table. I didn't plan to use it much. Honestly, I wasn't ready to hear from anyone. When the screen lit up, I glanced instinctively. It was a message from Celine. He stayed with me again. I'll explain later. I read it twice, then a third time. My stomach turned, not in a dramatic made-for-TV way, but in a quiet, sick kind of twist that made me set the phone down and stare at the wall. At first, I told myself it was a mistake. She must have meant to send it to someone else. A friend, maybe. But that voice inside me, the one I'd ignored for weeks, whispered, "You know exactly who she meant." I didn't respond. I didn't scream. I just sat there. I opened the Notes app and copied the message in, screenshot it too. Then I powered off the phone and slid it into the drawer beside the couch. That night, during dinner, I tried to say something. Velda had made her usual chicken casserole, the one with the crushed potato chips on top that used to be my comfort food when I was a kid. The kitchen smelled like fake cheese and nostalgia. "Mom," I started gently, "can I ask you something? Did Celine say anything about—" "She's been running herself ragged taking care of you, Brielle," Velda cut in sharply, not even looking up from her plate. "You've been through a lot. Maybe now isn't the time to be picking apart people's good intentions." I nodded slowly, pushing food around on my plate. Dorian, seated across from me, said nothing. He avoided my gaze completely. Celine entered the kitchen a few minutes later, her hair perfectly tousled like she'd just walked off a magazine cover. She laughed at something on her phone and slid into the chair next to Dorian. They exchanged a look, one of those too long glances that says everything without needing a word. I didn't eat much that night. Later, I went upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed. The house felt smaller, like the walls had crept in a few inches. I listened to the hum of the heat vents and the occasional creak of someone walking down the hall. I didn't belong here. Not anymore. The next morning, Velda called a family check-in. She made coffee, set out muffins like we were about to plan a picnic. Celine wore a soft pink sweater, her makeup flawless, her voice honey-sweet. "We just wanted to make sure you're okay," Velda began, hands folded like she was hosting a sermon. I nodded, bracing myself. "It's just," Celine chimed in, tilting her head. "You've seemed a little off." "Understandably so. We're just worried about your state of mind." "My state of mind." Velda sipped her coffee. "Maybe it's time to let go of any assumptions. We're all trying to move forward. And frankly, this wedding talk is creating unnecessary tension." "Wedding talk?" I sat there, watching them speak over me, about me, without ever really seeing me. I stood up slowly. "I think I need some air." Neither of them stopped me. Outside, I walked the length of the backyard, boots crunching against leftover snow. The air was sharper than I remembered. It cleared my head. Inside that house, I was the problem. The dramatic one. The burden. But out here, the silence didn't lie. They thought I would back down, that I'd swallow my questions, stay quiet, play nice. But I didn't need their permission to start looking for the truth. I started the morning with my laptop open and coffee that had gone cold twice. I wasn't checking emails or planning anything wedding-related. That part of my life felt like a closed chapter someone else had written. Instead, I was scrolling through old photos, back before engagement rings and hospital rooms, before Celine started hovering around my life like a shadow I didn't invite in. I didn't know what I was looking for, not exactly. Maybe I just wanted to remember who Dorian used to be, or maybe I needed to remind myself why I'd said yes in the first place. I paused on a photo from college. Dorian, shirtless at a beach party, a ridiculous hat perched sideways on his head, holding a red Solo cup like it was a trophy. His smile stretched wide, natural, not the cautious, camera-aware grin he wore these days. But it wasn't his face that held me still. In the blurry background, just over his shoulder, a girl laughed with her head tilted back, her wrist lifted mid-gesture. A thin silver bracelet dangled there, barely catching the sun. The same bracelet Celine still wore. The same one she claimed was from an old boyfriend years ago. I zoomed in. My pulse shifted gears. I needed answers. Real ones. So I called Lacey, one of my few friends from undergrad who hadn't vanished into the chaos of adulting. We hadn't talked in months, maybe longer, but I skipped the pleasantries. Hey, did Celine ever date Dorian? Back in college? My voice sounded too steady, like I was asking about the weather. Lacey didn't answer right away. There was a pause, just long enough to be damning. Oh wow, she said. You didn't know? My spine stiffened. Didn't know what? Yeah. It wasn't super serious, but they were a thing senior year. Everyone knew. I thought you did too. I mean, she introduced you two, right? No, she hadn't. She'd told me Dorian worked with her on a student fundraiser, that he was smart and funny and surprisingly single. I remembered the smile on her face when she told me that, like she was handing me a prize. Why didn't anyone ever say anything? Lacey cleared her throat. Honestly, we all thought it was weird. But then you two looked so happy, and Celine acted like it was ancient history. She said you were her sister and she wanted the best for you. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat frozen for several minutes. Had I ever truly chosen Dorian? Or had I just accepted the version Selena gave me, like hand-me-down clothes folded too neatly to question? I stood up and paced the room, the wooden floor creaking under my steps. My skin itched like I'd just been told my entire life was a play, and I was the last one to see the script. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I opened a notebook instead. On the first page I wrote, "He was hers first. She never really let go." Then I started listing things, small moments, out-of-place glances, words that hit differently in hindsight. The text Celine sent by mistake, the dress fitting she insisted on, the way Dorian never once asked if I wanted to postpone the wedding after the accident. The list grew fast. My hand ached, but I didn't stop. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I was building a record, my version of events, a timeline they couldn't twist. I didn't know what I'd do with it. Not yet. But as I closed the notebook, I whispered to myself, I will not explode. I will evolve. It was time to search not just for answers, but for evidence. The house was quiet, except for the occasional tick of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. My parents were out shopping for groceries, something Velda insisted on doing every Thursday like clockwork, and I finally had the place to myself. It was the perfect moment to poke around. Upstairs in the study, I rummaged through one of the drawers where Dad kept old tech gadgets. Buried beneath a mess of cords and dead batteries was the shared tablet Dorian and I used to browse for registry items. I'd nearly forgotten it existed. I powered it on. It still worked. The screen flickered for a moment, then opened to the home screen. No password. Just like he'd left it. I tapped the email icon out of habit, not expecting much. But the app launched, and I froze. The account was still logged in. Dorian's personal inbox staring back at me like an unlocked diary. My heart pounded. I knew it wasn't ethical, not by any standard. But ethics had left the building weeks ago. I typed hotel into the search bar. There it was. A reservation confirmation. 3 nights at a mountain resort about an hour outside Asheville. The email was recent, dated during the same week I'd been lying in a hospital bed. The sender? The hotel manager. Subject line, romantic getaway package. Confirmation for Mr. and Mrs. G. I tapped the attachment. The PDF loaded slowly, like it knew I needed to feel every ounce of dread inch by inch. The reservation had been booked under Celine's name. My lungs tightened. I scrolled through the document, trying to make sense of it, trying to pretend it wasn't exactly what it looked like. Welcome back, Mr. and Mrs. Garrison. It read, We're thrilled you chose us again. Again? I rubbed my eyes hard, like maybe the words would blur into something more innocent. But they stayed sharp, just like the pain in my chest. They hadn't just stolen a moment. They'd stolen my name, my future. The silence in the room became suffocating. I needed air. I needed answers. But more than anything, I needed Celine to see that I wasn't the fool they'd been banking on. I printed the receipt on Dad's ancient laser printer. It made that familiar grinding sound like it was coughing up the truth. I folded the paper, tucked it into my coat pocket, and waited until my parents left again the next afternoon. Then I confronted her. She was in the kitchen, casually scrolling her phone and eating an apple like the world wasn't burning down around us. I placed the receipt on the counter beside her. She didn't even flinch. "You broke into his email?" she asked, eyebrow raised like I was the criminal. "I found the truth," I said evenly. "You can dress it up however you want, but that doesn't change what you did." Celine took a bite of her apple, chewed slowly, then smiled. "You're so dramatic, Brielle. It was just a comfort weekend. We both needed space to process everything. It wasn't romantic." "Really?" I asked. "Because the suite you stayed in was labeled romantic getaway, all inclusive. There's even a note welcoming you back as Mr. and Mrs. Garrison. You want to explain that too?" She rolled her eyes. "Maybe the desk clerk just assumed. It's not a crime." "No," I said, voice low, "but pretending this didn't happen. Pretending you didn't cross every boundary, that is. Don't mistake my silence for weakness, Celine. If this continues, I will not stay quiet." She scoffed and turned her back, muttering something under her breath. I walked away. That was the moment I knew something had shifted. For both of us. She thought I was bluffing, and that was her biggest mistake. Dinner was Velda's idea, her attempt to smooth over what she called all this unnecessary tension. She texted everyone that morning with a cheery, "Just a little family meal. Let's bring some warmth back before the big day." As if a roast and some sweet tea could erase betrayal. I almost didn't go. Every part of me wanted to stay upstairs and let them talk about me without the inconvenience of my presence. But something told me to show up, if only to look them in the eyes and confirm what I already knew. The dining room looked too perfect. Candles flickered like we were celebrating something. The good plates were out, the ones Velda usually saved for Easter. I stepped into the room slowly, scanning for any sign that this was actually about family. And there it was, on Celine's hand, the ring, my ring, polished to a new shine, now sitting on the finger of the woman who took my place like it was always meant to be hers. Celine lifted her glass as I entered, her smile razor thin. "Oh, good. You made it," she said, voice dripping with sweetness. Dorian didn't look up. He just kept slicing into his chicken like it was a task that required full concentration. Velda bustled around with side dishes, pretending not to notice the tension so thick it could have choked a grown man. "Isn't this nice?" she chirped. "All of us here, just like old times." Not once did she mention the ring. Not once did she ask me if I was okay with it. Dinner was a blur of hollow conversation and fork clinks. I answered when spoken to, but mostly I watched. I watched how Celine touched Dorian's arm lightly when she laughed. I watched how he didn't flinch. When dessert arrived, store-bought pecan pie dressed up with whipped cream, Celine raised her glass again. "To new beginnings," she said, staring straight at me. "To finding what was meant to be." I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I just lifted my own glass of water and sipped slowly, never breaking eye contact. After dinner, while Velda fussed in the kitchen, I followed Celine into the hallway. She was pretending to look for her scarf in the coat closet. I leaned against the doorframe. "You wore my ring," I said. She turned slowly, that smug curve on her lips returning like clockwork. "It looks better on me," she replied. "Always did. You were never the girl he really wanted, Brielle. You were the pause between us." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't take the bait. "You may wear my ring," I said calmly, "but when it falls off, it'll take your mask with it." Her eyes narrowed, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of staying. I walked past her, straight upstairs. Once in my room, I pulled out my phone. I had snapped a photo during dinner, Celine's hand resting on the stem of her wine glass, the ring glittering in the candlelight. I sent it to Kira with a short message. "Hold this. I may need it when I burn this farce to the ground." Then I opened my laptop. I didn't know what my endgame was yet, but I knew I needed to be ready. I began backing up everything, texts, emails, photos. I created folders labeled with dates, screenshots, hotel names. I didn't cry, not anymore. There was no room left for tears, only proof. They had declared war with jewelry. I would respond with proof. Kira didn't ask why I was trembling when I showed up at her door. She just opened her arms, let me in, and handed me a mug of hot tea. We didn't say much at first. She knew better. Some truths needed room before they were spoken aloud. We sat side by side on her couch while I pulled out my phone and opened the video. I hadn't watched it since she first sent it to me a few days after the engagement party, the one I never wanted but let Velda orchestrate anyway. The same party where Celine and Dorian had toasted to lasting love, while everyone clapped and cheered and pretended not to notice the undercurrent between them. The clip was short, 26 seconds. It showed the tail end of that toast, Celine leaning in, brushing Dorian's cheek with a kiss that lingered far too long. His hand slid to her lower back, holding her there, like nothing about it was wrong. In the background, I stood smiling, clapping with the rest, not seeing what was happening right in front of me. "I don't want to be impulsive," I said, throat tight, "but I'm done being quiet." Kira nodded. "You want to post it?" "I want them to feel what I've felt every day since that hospital bed. Powerless. Alone." She pulled up our private family Facebook group, Velda's pride and joy for sharing birthday cakes, baby photos, and updates on who brought what to Thanksgiving. Then, without another word, she uploaded the clip. No caption, no explanation. Just the truth, raw and unsweetened. Next, I emailed it directly to Velda. Subject line, "Just so you know." I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. By nightfall, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Missed calls, voicemails, texts flooding in from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were short. "Saw it." Unbelievable. Others were longer, apologetic, awkwardly supportive. And then Velda called. "How dare you?" she hissed the moment I picked up. "Do you have any idea what you've done to your sister? To this family?" I didn't argue. I let her talk. Accuse, defend, spin. When she finally stopped, I took a breath and said, "I've done exactly what you refused to. I told the truth." Then I hung up. Dorian's mother pulled out of the wedding coordination committee by morning. The florist called to say someone else had taken over the account, but, due to the recent circumstances, they were withdrawing services entirely. The caterer followed. By noon, Celine was calling. "I swear to God, Brielle, I will sue you for defamation," she snarled into the phone. I didn't say a word, just sent her a thumbs-up emoji and blocked the number. Later that day, I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. My father stood by the sink, back to me, arms folded. I thought he'd ignore me, stay out of it like he always did. Instead, he turned, looked me in the eye and said, "I believe you." That moment hurt more than anything else so far. Not because it wasn't welcome, but because I realized how long I'd needed to hear it. I nodded. No tears, just relief. That evening, I sat at my desk and pulled up my wedding guest list. Then I opened a blank document and began creating a new one. Not for a wedding, but for the future. People who would be in it, people who would not. The fire had started, but it was time to step into the flames myself. It started with coffee. Velda called that morning, her tone sticky with artificial sweetness. Celine and I thought it might be good for closure. No pressure, of course, just a chat. A chat. I agreed, mostly out of morbid curiosity. I wanted to see how far they'd go to rewrite the story now that the truth was no longer hiding in the dark corners of their orchestrated narrative. They greeted me in the kitchen, seated like two executives waiting for a client to sign on the dotted line. The room smelled like cinnamon and lies. On the table sat a single manila envelope, closed neatly, no name written on it. Celine smiled as I sat down. "We know things have gotten tense. This isn't about blame. We're just hoping for some clarity before the big day." I didn't respond. Velda slid the envelope toward me like she was offering me a gift. "It's just some basic paperwork. A standard agreement, really. Division of wedding costs, venue credits, vendor contacts, clean and simple." I opened the folder and began reading. The language was soft at first. Lists of services, deposits, floral arrangements. But then I saw it. A clause buried beneath logistical jargon. By signing, the undersigned agrees to waive all legal rights to pursue damages, emotional or financial, against parties associated with the change of wedding plans. My fingers stopped moving. I looked up. Celine was stirring her coffee, her ring catching the light just enough to sparkle. "You want me to sign away my right to sue?" I asked calmly. Velda shifted. It's just a formality, honey, so we can all move forward. Celine didn't even look up. I stood, folded the paper in half, and slid it back into the envelope. I'll take this with me. I like to read fine print when I'm not being gaslit. Their silence was the closest thing to an admission I was ever going to get. I left without another word. The next day, I walked into the bridal boutique to cancel my final fitting. I didn't expect sympathy. I just wanted to be done with the place. The receptionist looked up, confused. Oh, didn't your sister already take care of that? What do you mean? She came in yesterday, finalized the alterations. We just got the framed photo from the fitting for the promotion display. Gorgeous, by the way. She gestured to a small counter display. My eyes landed on it and my breath caught. Celine, in my dress. The same silhouette I had chosen 6 months ago, now tucked and tailored to hug curves that weren't mine. She stood before the camera, bouquet in hand, chin lifted like she'd conquered something. They hadn't just stolen the man. They'd tailored my dream to fit their lie. I walked out. By the time I got home, I knew what I had to do. I called my father into the living room. He looked tired, more so than usual. I handed him the waiver and pointed at the clause. He read it once, then again. His face hardened. Did you sign this? He asked. No, I said, but I want you to hear what they tried to pull. I took the document back, unfolded it in front of both of us, and read it aloud, each word slicing the air like a blade. Then I ripped it in half. Velda stormed in from the kitchen, voice raised. You've ruined everything, Brielle. This could have been over quietly. I turned to her, the shredded paper still in my hand. No, I just stopped playing dead. And with that, I walked upstairs. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat down at my desk, opened a blank document, and began drafting an announcement. Not for a wedding, for a reckoning. If they wanted a quiet end, they picked the wrong woman. The morning of their rehearsal came with a gray sky that refused to commit to rain. I drove in silence, window cracked just enough for the cold air to bite at my jaw. I didn't belong at that venue anymore, but something inside me had to see it. Had to feel the sting before I cut it out for good. When I pulled up to the gates of the estate, I didn't even need to check the signage. The decor spilling out of the courtyard told me everything. The wreaths, the blush and cream palette, the same floral arch I'd spent months planning with the florist. They were all there, untouched, unchanged, except the names. Where my name had once been etched into a wooden welcome sign was now a chalkboard with hand-lettered calligraphy. Welcome to the wedding of Celine and Dorian. I walked in. No one stopped me. Maybe they assumed I was hired staff. Maybe no one dared. Inside the ballroom, everything was arranged just as I'd imagined it for my own ceremony. The pews angled for perfect light, the harpist rehearsing in the corner. My plans, my money, my vision, now theirs. I kept moving, quiet and slow, until I reached the guest list table. There it was, printed on ivory paper, table placements alphabetized. I flipped through until I found what I already knew. My name wasn't on it, erased, as if I had never existed. A hand grazed my arm. I turned. Velda stood beside me, holding a clipboard like a maitre d'. She didn't look surprised to see me. I thought you'd come, she said, cool and composed. You should leave before people start arriving. They already did, I said, in my colors under my arch at my venue. Her smile didn't falter. Well, Celine moved quickly. We needed to salvage what we could. You didn't salvage, I said. You hijacked. She sighed. Don't be petty, Brielle. You always did hate when things didn't go your way. I didn't respond. I walked into the main hall where the toasts were beginning. Dorian stood at the front, looking stiff in his suit, hand wrapped tightly around a champagne flute. Celine stood beside him, radiant and poised, as if betrayal were the latest fashion trend. Velda stepped up to the mic. I think I speak for everyone when I say, this feels right, she said. We always knew Celine would be the one standing here. Gasps fluttered across the room. Even Dorian looked startled. I stood near the back, clapped once, slow and sharp, and turned on my heel. No words, no scene, just a clean break. That night at home, I opened my laptop. I wrote, to the woman who stole my wedding. You can keep the dress, the man, the lies. I'm taking back my name. I sent the letter to the entire guest list, every single person. By dawn, it had been screenshotted and reposted. Someone turned it into a graphic. It circulated in Facebook groups for women who had survived betrayal. Reddit picked it up. "This is how you reclaim your voice," one commenter wrote. "She didn't scream. She spoke." They thought they erased me. All they did was highlight my absence. The text came just after sunrise, lighting up my phone like it had something important to say. "You were always the one. I was just too weak." No name, no apology, just Dorian's voice in one last flicker of shame. I read it once, not twice. I didn't let it settle. I deleted it before the screen dimmed. I had no appetite for recycled guilt. A week had passed since the letter went viral. Strangers had shared it, reposted it, even quoted it in blog posts about healing and boundaries. A few called me brave, some called me bitter. I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't interested in applause, and I wasn't searching for pity. Celine had gone quiet, refused all interviews, blocked her Instagram. Velda told neighbors it was a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion, but the silence spoke louder than any press release ever could. People remember quiet shame longer than loud denial. That morning, I walked to the park with a thermos of coffee and no plan. Just space, just breath. There was a wedding shoot happening near the lake. A young couple, all nerves and giddy smiles, the bride trying to keep her train off the damp ground, while the photographer gave cheerful instructions. I stood for a moment, watching them. Not with envy, not with grief, just stillness. That could have been me. Maybe it should have been. But standing there, wrapped in my coat and unburdened by a future that had been molded by someone else's hands, I felt light. Later that afternoon, I met with a new therapist, soft-spoken, intuitive, the kind who asked the kind of questions that didn't demand answers, but invited honesty. We talked about ownership, about how letting go didn't mean forgetting, about how strength sometimes looks like choosing not to look back. I began teaching again, too. Art classes on Thursday nights at the community center. Teenagers mostly. A few retired folks looking to finally try watercolor. The smell of paint and charcoal on my hands made me feel real again, tangible in a way that no relationship ever had. One of my students asked last week, "Have you ever been married?" I smiled. "Almost." I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. That evening, I walked home through the same neighborhood that had once felt like a maze of what-ifs. The same cracked sidewalks, the same rusted mailbox. But something inside me had shifted. Back at home, I opened a new journal and wrote the words that had been waiting at the edge of my throat. They didn't steal my future. They just removed themselves from it. I closed the journal, set it down gently, and poured myself a glass of wine. Not to drown anything, but to toast something. To survival, to clarity, to never settling for stolen joy again. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering without letting it own you. Life has a way of unraveling the stories we once wrote in ink we thought was permanent. But sometimes, what feels like the end is really just the start of something honest. I used to think healing meant silence, that moving on meant pretending it never happened. But I've learned this. Peace comes when you stop needing permission to exist loudly in your truth. Have you ever had to reclaim something that was yours? Not just a relationship, but your voice, your dignity, your name. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story spoke to your heart, drop a 1 below or let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't, tell me why. It matters. If this video found you at the right time, subscribe to the channel for more real stories that speak to the strength inside all of us.